Welcome to the land of no easy answers. I'm Alex Knight, joined by Kristin Rumohr.
Come on.
And over in that other corner to the side is Aaron Stewart.
Come on.
We have a wonderful panel as always. It's the same panel every time, unless we tell you otherwise. Kristin is a holistic clinical counselor. Hopefully I get your title right here. And Aaron is a multifaceted individual. He's good at building things. He's done theater. He's done a lot of stuff. He has a lot of life experience, so he adds a lot of value to this show.
I was wondering where you were going to go with that.
Oh, it's been hot lately as we record this. Yes, we have had an early start to the summer. We've had record temperatures here, not just in Vancouver, but a lot of places in the world are seeing record temperatures. So that's the stage we're setting for today. We are talking about climate change, and there's a fantastic article here that I was reading in National Geographic. It's called Too Hot to Live, and it was written by Elizabeth Royt here. And I just think the first paragraph here, this perfectly sums things up about the situation we're in. The human body has evolved to shed heat in two main ways. Blood vessels swell, carrying heat to the skin so it can radiate away, and sweat erupts onto the skin, cooling it by evaporation. When those mechanisms fail, we die. Sounds straightforward. It's actually a complex, cascading collapse. Isn't that a cheery, wonderful thought?
We had 750 deaths in BC because of the heat.
Well, that is one of the main issues. Obviously, the immediate issue right now is obviously there's a certain demographic of people that are at extreme risk of dying, and that's usually the elderly. You know, you got people not just in care homes, but especially people that live alone. Maybe they don't really have people that can check on them, and unfortunately, people find dead bodies sometimes for just who knows how long, sitting there for weeks in their apartment, and it's awful. And there have been record heat waves in the past. This one's probably one of the worst that we've had here. I don't know about other places. And
every record has
in
been shattered.
BC, it was only a couple degrees cooler than the hottest temperature ever recorded on Earth.
Yeah.
In Canada.
Yeah. And then Lytton, BC immediately burnt to the ground.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. There were some pretty serious fires there. But
and that's the problem. It's the sudden nature of this, where it started off, I mean, we were in the 20s the week before, and then it's 45 degrees.
Right.
And that's what really caught people unawares.
Yeah.
And that was the problem. We're going to have a lot more of this happening where it's just going to come out of nowhere, and it's going to be a real devastating blow for a lot of people who just aren't equipped to deal with that kind of heat. Yeah. And like the article says, is the web bulb temperatures where your sweat just has nowhere to go because the air is already saturated. And that's going to be the norm for a lot more places as we continue down this path of fun.
So what happens to you if your sweat can't evaporate?
That's exactly the problem.
Well, you just overheat and eventually die. That is the problem. That is one of the primary ways of your body dealing with it. And if there's high humidity, your body can't do that. The sweat doesn't evaporate, and therefore that's what causes the problem. But also, I just want to say quickly too, for anyone listening that's American too, they're going to be very confused by the fact that we're talking in Celsius. It's going to be very hard to wrap their brain around
40 degrees,
that.
That's freezing.
So it was 42 degrees. It was 42 degrees last week, and 42 degrees Celsius translates to 107.6 degrees Fahrenheit, which is we're getting into desert temperatures. That's like Las Vegas temperatures. I mean, Las Vegas gets even hotter than that. It's unseasonal. It's very unusual. It's very unusual. And, one of the things that this article talked about was one of the record heat waves. I believe it was in 2003 in France. They had a staggering amount of people that died. It says France eventually attributed more than 15,000 deaths to the heat wave. Italy fared even worse with nearly 20,000. Across the continent, more than 70,000 people, most of them poor, isolated and elderly, lost their lives.
And so, we're talking about climate change, and everybody always talks about, oh, it's too costly for us to change. And I go, 150,000 people dead. We've already got wildfires, 170 wildfires at the last count that I had read last night, out of control. How many cities, people evacuated? How much does all of this cost? If we were to add this up and start charging the oil companies for this,
yeah,
would we see any traction here? Like the problem is there's no accountability for any of that. Who do we charge for that forest fire? Is it the guy who threw the cigarette, or the person or the corporation that created the circumstances that allowed that to happen in the first place? And this is my problem. The corporation would rather blame that guy, which I get. I mean, if you're flicking cigarettes into a fucking forest, I have no remorse for you. I just don't like out your window of your car. How dare you? Like the idea that last year the fires in California were started by people doing fucking gender reveal parties. What? Oh, just like you haven't been watching the tinderbox all around you and going, maybe we should rethink this. I guess
it comes back to what we talk about a lot, is just the entitlement culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, yeah, it's hot, but that shouldn't prevent me from tossing my cigarettes where I want to.
Probably the same person who
had
tosses
that accent,
but generic. I don't know. It's yeah. But that's same person who's tossing his garbage out the window.
Yeah.
Same guy.
Right. It's the not my problem mentality. Someone else should do something about this.
And my issue is, how do you reach that person? How do we actually get to the point where we can, without like literally having to follow the guy for blocks, carrying the garbage in your car to toss it in his window so that he might have to have some accountability for it? How else are we supposed to deal with this? It's these, everybody goes, oh, maybe you should just calm down. And I go, but my problem is time. We only have so much time. And if you are deliberately, being just an ass in my way, like, how am I supposed to deal with this? Am I not supposed to react as if you've done something to me that I should be able to object to?
Let's talk about some of the things that we can learn from what France did, because they took action in 2003 after that record heat wave and the amount of people that perished because of it. It says that, so the measures that they took, within a year, France mandated quote-unquote cool rooms in previously un-air-conditioned nursing homes, launched telephone check-in systems for the vulnerable, beefed up heat warning systems, and inaugurated a massive public education campaign on preventing heat stroke. When high temperatures returned, such measures were credited with reducing mortality tenfold. So that just goes to show you, yes, something can be done, and I don't accept that something can't be done, right? When people and a lot of people have been blaming the government of BC that they could have done more. And I was talking with other people about this too the other day, friends and family, and people are like, "Well, the government can't do anything. What are they going to do about this?" Well, actually, other countries have done stuff and have proven that, yes, you can put measures in place. Clearly, what France did reduced the mortality rate considerably. So yes, you can't completely fix the problem, but you can. Here's the other interesting thing too, is of course we know that there are, especially in poor areas, poor countries where, people just don't have money for air conditioning. That's another problem. Air conditioning is incredibly expensive. There's actually, it's a multifaceted problem because it's expensive to have air conditioning. And then the very act of having refrigerant inside there, first of all, they're inefficient. Refrigerant is toxic, and the way that we make these things is actually bad for the environment, because if that refrigerant leaks, that's incredibly toxic too. So there have been different initiatives. People all over the world, smart people, have been trying to figure out ways to come up with alternatives to air conditioner, or just improving on the design to replace the refrigerant with other means of cooling down the air. Some people have been more successful than others, but that's a serious problem too. And then think about what load that puts on the power system. Right? If millions of people are running air conditioning 24/7 during a heat wave, that's also another challenge. Is if the grid isn't capable of keeping up with that, then that's another problem. So there are a lot of issues that go along with fixing this too.
And rolling blackouts and
there's a lot of issues. I completely understand why not everyone has an air conditioner. Right.
Well, and see, my only thing with that article was that it was very anthropomorphic. Think about an animal that has no access to AC. Right? Like, consider all of the everybody out there right now that's trapped in this and has no way of getting out of this whatsoever, right? And the problem is that, like, we created this monster, right? That's now crushing everything in its path. And I just, again, it's this idea that we have the power to change this, but, the idea that you personally are going to do it, right? Like, this is something that we have to force governments and corporations to end.
It has to start at the top, for sure.
Right? They've now uncovered recordings from Exxon and Shell and a bunch of other oil executives that they had buried since the 70s, of them knowing exactly that this was going to happen. Their scientists have been telling them from the 70s and the 80s and the 90s that this exact scenario would play out, and they buried it and denied it and spent billions of dollars trying to convince us otherwise.
Wow.
And we have them on recordings boasting about their ability to do so, using the same playbook as Big Tobacco, and basically leading us down this merry path of trying to blame us for their malfeasance. And it has to end. It has to end. The only way that we will be able to fix this is through accountability. It's the same problem with the opioid crisis. The idea that those biotech companies can foist this upon us and then just completely avoid all responsibility for it. Nope. Not happening anymore. Can't do that. Your lawyers should not be able to shield you from accountability if you are killing people. That's just...
Yeah. Let's also talk about what other cities are doing around the world. Now, these are... when you first look at this, it's like, okay, well, these seem like very small efforts, but they do actually help. In hot cities around the world, crews are planting shade trees and creeping vines to block sunlight. They're painting rooftops, installing rooftop gardens, erecting shade structures on sidewalks and in parks, hooking up misters and spray showers in playgrounds, and experimenting with roughly textured permeable pavement, which cools surrounding air by absorbing and then evaporating rainwater. In New York City, researchers from Columbia University's Earth Institute calculated that planting trees over 17% of the city's land surface and treating all roofs to reflect rather than absorb solar radiation could lower the city's overall temperature by 1.6 degrees Fahrenheit, or nearly a degree Celsius.
Wow.
We don't know if we don't know if these tools will be enough to survive another half degree Celsius of warming, let alone the projected 3 degrees by century's end. But doing nothing is obviously not sufficient. You can't just sit around and do nothing.
Yeah, and that's for Kristin here. Like, the mental health toll of this must be pretty staggering too, right? Like, just the idea that our bodies aren't meant to take this kind of heat, and that generally makes people, somewhat irritable.
Well, I'm sure we've all noticed it over the last week, right? People are very, very short-tempered all of a sudden.
Well, not
Right?
just
We don't know how to deal with it. So when our bodies go into survival mode, which is exactly what happens, right? We're presented with a situation we're not used to. Our bodies don't know how to deal with this heat.
Absolutely.
Very few of us have air conditioners, right? You go into survival, which means I look out for me, screw everyone in my way kind of mentality, right?
Yeah, it is pretty scary in extreme heats. It absolutely does affect your mood, and it not only affects your mood, it affects your productivity. I mean, look what happened when the heat wave hit just the other week. I mean, like we couldn't even do the podcast. It was just unbearable. You can't work. That's the other thing. People, imagine all the people working from home now during the pandemic, how that affects their productivity. How does it affect the bottom line of businesses when people can't operate properly and all you can do is just sit on your couch and melt and just try to get through the day when it's that bad, right?
And so let's get to the first aid aspect of the podcast here of how to tell when someone is having heat stroke or having heat exhaustion.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Because this is going to be a big thing for us moving forward, is if you see your friend like when you stop sweating, that's one of the first signs that you're now hitting a point of heat exhaustion, which leads to like a heat stroke, which will literally cause your internal organs to start shutting down.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem with this whole heat thing, is that your body just isn't equipped to, again, without that heat dissipation mechanism, to be able to even function properly. So the blood starts heating up, which causes your organs to start failing, which causes you to essentially shut down. Okay. And so again, if you stop sweating, if you notice people starting to get woozy, that's another sign, right? Fruit juices, find something with some sugar in it, give them lots of water. Don't immediately throw them into a cold shower. You need to bring their temperature down slowly.
What about salt? Maybe having
salt is a good one.
I just thought about this the other day too, of maybe getting salt pills just for emergency situations.
Well, the electrolytes are going to be a problem. The more you sweat, the more you don't, like I get cramps because I have this issue.
I'm not sweating at all right now. Does that mean I'm dying right now? I could be dying.
Sure. If you have been sweating profusely and you stop sweating, despite doing the same thing, that is a sign of a problem.
Also, if you're not thirsty all of a sudden, that's the big one, right? When you're massively dehydrated. It's a bit counterintuitive. You're actually not thirsty and you think you're okay.
But it's because your body is just trying to preserve as much liquid as possible, and so it even shuts off your saliva. It'll actually turn that right off and start sucking that liquid, right? Like that's the survival thing that your body does. And if you're not aware that it's doing it, you would just go and throw yourself into a cold shower. And I had a friend of mine whose wife nearly passed out. They were out in Penticton for the day in 45 degrees. And she came home and hopped into a shower, and it nearly killed her. Wow. Because it's that kind of shock to your system, where your body temperature has gone up to a point where that cold shower can just drag you down to a point that your body can't cope with. And that's why you need to kind of slowly bring yourself down, get some cold compresses, just get cold water and just dab yourself, just get that dissipation going. If you can't sweat properly, having the water on you will help to at least have some of that go away, right?
Well, it's kind of the opposite of, if someone's hypothermic, everyone knows you don't just throw them into a hot shower, right? Yeah. So it's the same logic from the other side. Yeah. While
we're very resilient, we're also somewhat fragile at times too. So there's that's the thing. Like, we operate within a very narrow band of what we can survive, and that's the other part that this whole climate thing has been really just messing with me. Is that, like, I know that if the temperature goes above that, we don't survive anymore.
Yeah.
Like, it's very simple, right? And when they've been warning us that, this 2 degrees thing would literally kill us, everybody went, whatever, man. And I just go, no, that's narrow band. If the oxygen goes away, we die.
As I was reading this too about how this heat affects poor countries and poor people in general, it made me really realize, man, we are super, super lucky and super blessed here. Like, countries in India here, in this article here talking about, somebody, like a family who's, they just live in a tent, and this lady's husband, who goes to work because he's often malnourished, and especially in this heat, oftentimes ends up passing out, and they can't afford, like, both of them work, they can't afford not to work, because otherwise they can't feed their children, and then everybody's going to perish, right? So we're pretty lucky here, even though we all complain about the heat and everything, but there are people that don't even have homes and barely have any kind of shelter.
And so that was actually one of the fixes they mentioned in that article was a universal basic income, right? But that's where, like, we talk about it here in our country, and I go, but isn't supposed to be universal for everyone? And I get trying to help out our own community here, but again, I also feel like this should be a global initiative, where there should be some sort of fund that we could put in place that where every country in the world, because this is going to be a problem for everyone, right? Just puts in some money that we can help bring everybody to a point where they're not going to die if the heat wave strikes. It feels like the bare minimum that we can do.
And I feel like we're kind of getting to that point with a lot of things, not just global warming that's happening and affecting all of us, that we're almost transcending borders and countries at this point, right? It's almost worth it to say the good of humanity now, we all just need to band together, right? Because all of us doing our own individual thing isn't working, clearly. Right? Because everyone has their own agenda. Everyone is owned by somebody somewhere, right? That's kind of affecting policy change. And at some point, we just need to do away with it and say what's best for everyone.
That was one of the great thing about Nat Geo is they talk about how the displacement of people who are just not going to be able to live in these places anymore. It will literally be too hot for humans to live there. And so these people are going to need to go somewhere. So the idea of having borders and allowing and blah, 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 all these regulations when people are dying, is something that we're really going to have to start addressing moving forward when we have, literal caravans coming because people are dying if we don't let them in.
Well, and what's the end game to that too, right? If you're rich and can afford it, you get to live in these outlying areas that are still cool enough and everyone else just gets left behind.
Yeah.
Sadly, that's kind of the way our society is moving at the moment.
Well, and it's the problem of the people who are benefiting from it are the ones who fucking caused it in the first place. And that is the part that just like the CEOs of these corporations are allowed to get away with this and live on their mega yacht while the rest of the world burns. I just... just nothing about that seems right by any stretch of the imagination. But they're really good at their job.
Are they?
The other thing that I want to see, and this is the other issue too with air conditioning, is the article goes into this about how we need to figure out a way to also get the cost of that stuff down. Right, as this becomes an increasing problem, that's something I would like to see. And also, we need to everybody knows this, of course, and it's easier said than done. But we need to significantly reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. We just need to get rid of these coal plants, right? We need to. I think everyone seems to have some consensus, at least between scientists, that there's about 50 years or so where things are going to get really bad after 50 years or so from now, right?
Well,
I'd say probably sooner than that, but
it's already starting.
Yeah.
They said it was going to start 20 years from now, and it's already here.
Yeah.
Right?
And we're seeing it. We're getting earlier and earlier summers, and it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter, right?
And it's in direct correlation to the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
It's very funny how when you put those two together, you just see this, it's funny.
Interesting. Could there be some type of correlation between these things?
No. Obviously,
no, it doesn't exist.
And that's again the problem of, at what point do we just say enough? Enough.
Well,
Disinformation.
It needs to start from the top, right? Because the thing is, when we're putting it, it's always passing the buck to, the average person, which is unfair. And most people do their part, we're recycling and trying to cut down. But at the end of the day, it just needs to be our reliance on oil gone, right? We're going to stop funding the production of oil-consuming vehicles and instead make green energy vehicles more affordable, right? How about plastic is now illegal, right? Unless it's for, certain, microchips or whatever, but single-use plastics, plastic packaging, any of these things, boom, done. Sorry, companies, you need to spend a couple extra cents to package your materials in something sustainable, right? And those decisions we don't affect at kind of the lowest level. That has to start at the top, right? And how do you affect that change?
Well, that's where, speaking of starting at the top, is a maximum wage. That was one of the other things they recommended in this, was that the idea that, Elon Musk is using his $170 billion beneficially for mankind. Sorry, buddy. It's just not a thing, right? The idea that we have allowed someone to accumulate that much at the expense of everyone else is just insane. And I just have to say, enough is enough. $2 billion, is that enough? 1 billion? Like, seriously, how much do you really need? And apparently Elon Musk lives very modestly in a very small house. And I go, that's nice.
Good for him.
But you still have all of this money that could literally pull the entirety of the rest of the world out of poverty.
And also, what good is your money if the world's on fire anyways?
Yeah. And again, you may not have caused this, right? But if you have the means to fix it.
Yeah. I mean, here's another thing. Many cities around the world operate cooling centers. So in New York operates...
We have them here too.
New York operates libraries, schools, senior centers, and other buildings that open their doors to the public during heat waves. In New York, the centers are closed at night, and many people who might find relief in such places aren't aware they exist. Some refuse to visit them for fear their empty apartments will be burgled, as Klinenberg found in Chicago. In Phoenix, homeless people would rather roast in tent cities on asphalt parking lots than leave their worldly goods behind while seeking indoor relief. Wow.
Well, that is the problem. If they have no place to lock any of their stuff up, then that hard-won stuff, as it might look small to you, but to them, it's all they've got. And that's just, the idea that we've allowed people to get to that point too, right? I just, especially now, that's going to be another problem. Like, if you have no access to these things, we're just going to look down on you and go, nah, it sucks to be you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that we also, and the article goes into this as well, is that, in addition to making steps now to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, reducing carbon emissions, all that's great too. But we also have to we're probably going to have to start engineering buildings with the increasing heat in mind, right? And making sure things are done from an architectural standpoint to account for increases in temperatures, right? If we know that this is going to be a thing.
Tearing down forests and green spaces to build more concrete, right?
Well, that's a whole nother problem altogether.
Again, could there be a correlation between these things? Yeah, of course there is.
But again, it's not like this is anything that hasn't been heard before. You just haven't been listening.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, or it hasn't directly affected you until now. But the thing is, when you wait for it to directly affect you, it's already too late. Right. And that's the position we're almost finding ourselves in.
Yeah. And that's the point we keep trying to make here on the podcast, too, is that we are notoriously bad at long distance planning. Long-term planning is just not really our thing. And because of that, we need to really address this idea that, we got it all figured out. Right? Because we don't. Right. And most of this is just us trying to stumble through with the best information that we can gather. Right. And we get that. Right. But again, at some point, we have to have consensus. We have to, understand that for the best of everyone, the idea that you can deny climate change is fun and all, but at this point, it means nothing.
Mm-hmm. And even if you don't believe in it, what harm is it going to do by implementing some of these changes? You can still say if that's your belief, but, get an electric vehicle.
Well, that's the effectiveness of their strategy, is that they can basically say that it's going to ruin your whole life, and they want to dismantle everything that you've built, and they want to take this all away from you, and we want to just, right, instead of actually just making some very, reasonable changes that might actually be able to benefit anyone. And again, the corporations have been very effective at blaming you for all of this. Oh, if you just recycled a little more, if you just drove your car a little bit less, this would all fix itself. It's all been your problem and nothing to do with what we've been doing here in this gigantic facility that's pumping steam. Must just be steam. It's just water vapor, right? There's definitely nothing else in that, right? You know, and just don't look over here, but you guys are being very bad. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the problem is that, you know, the idea that we can fix this is somewhat ludicrous. You know, it again has to be a community effort where we all agree that this is enough and we have actual information on what we can do to move this forward. You know, and that's, again, I also think that the problem is that breeds a defeatist attitude that we have no control, and we do. Mm-hmm. Right. The problem is that the control has been taken from us by people who have a monetary incentive to do it. Mm-hmm. And until we take away that monetary incentive, this is just going to continue happening.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, excellent points. I think we should end it right there. Obviously, this is not going away. I think that was pretty concise. Obviously, this is not going away anytime soon.
Thing. It was if you just fine.
It's not going away anytime soon. So.
Well, you know, and you know, if it comes to the point of we have to start recording 6 episodes just so that we can avoid the 45-degree temperatures coming up next week, well,
we probably are going to have to start doing something like that. So we'll see.
We're just going to be on continuous loop here. It's just going to be us in the shower recording episodes. It's the only place where we can get some relief. And so you're just going to have, it's only here up. You're fine. Come on.
I was going to say our viewership drops to 0.
What are you talking about? Our viewership goes up to 2 million. That's to be. We just added a whole new.
Oh, God, no.
Well, it wasn't just going to be my butt the whole time. I mean, I know I did pitch that originally, but.
Yeah. Well, you know, if people out there need relief, they can always contact us and reach out to us on social media. We're available at the Subvert Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And of course, if you're watching this video on YouTube, thank you very much. Make sure you hit subscribe so that you get these episodes when they get released on Tuesdays and Thursdays every single week. And if you would like to share your thoughts on what you would like to hear, maybe you have a topic suggestion. So please drop a comment, let us know there. And you can also email us at, what's our email address? hello@thesubvertpodcast.com. There's a newsletter up on the website. You can subscribe to that, get article updates as we release them here. And of course, be part of our ever-growing community as well. We just started a Discord server, so we're trying to build a community there where like-minded, smart, handsome individuals like yourselves can join us in the conversation. Because it's all about building community, right? And we need to stick together because we're one planet, one people, right? That's all the time we have for this week. And remember, before you go, we're all fucked up. So let's be fucked up together. We'll see you next time. Bye.